Members, it's 10 o'clock, ready to start the meeting. So welcome members and officers and members of the public to the Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee on 25th of May 2023 here at County Hall in Dorchester. I am Councillor Shane Bartlett, Chairman of this meeting, and the officers attending are John Selgren, Executive Director for Place, Jonathan Mayer, Director Legal and Democratic, and Lindsay Watson, Senior Democratic Services Officer. Other officers will make themselves known as required during the course of the meeting. So can I just remind members that to turn your microphones off when you're speaking, and please ensure that your phones are switched off. Can you make sure that you talk directly into the microphone so that we're able to capture what you're saying? I would also like to take this point in time to actually thank Councillor Mark Roberts for all of his work that he did on this committee. Unfortunately, Councillor Mark Roberts has now left for this committee to pursue other avenues within Dorset Council, but I would, from the chair, like to thank him for the considerable amount of work that he did in scrutiny. I'll also take this opportunity to welcome our new member, who sadly can't be with us today because he's got a prior long-standing diary commitment, and that's Councillor Brian Heatley, who's going to be rejoining us, which I'm sure you, along with me, would welcome him back as well. Again, another very hard-working councillor. So if I move to agenda item 1, members, apologies. Ms Watson.
Chairman, apologies from councillors Adkins, Gorringe and Heatley.
Thank you, Ms Watson. I'll move to agenda item 2, the minutes. To confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of March 2023. Unless any member has anything they want to add, I'll take those as read. Okay, thank you, members. I'll sign those after the meeting. If I move to agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Does any member have any declaration of interest they wish to make? And if so, what action are you liable to take? No? If anything becomes apparent during the meeting, if you can let me know, please. Thank you. We'll move to agenda item 4, Chairman's update. We have 2 Chairman's updates on performance freedom of information, subject access requests, and also on the 20-mile-per-hour policy 6-month progress update. So if I move to the update on FOI and subject access requests, this has been provided by Service Manager for Assurance. The committee discussed the current performance of the Council's Freedom of Information, FOI, and subject access requests, SARs, at the meeting on the 30th of March. A number of the indicators are consistently showing as red, and the committee requested further information on the action being taken to improve performance. A full update accompanies the agenda papers. During 22-23, whole council performance for freedom of information requests responded to within timescales was recorded as amber for 10 of the 12 months, 3 of which were very close to the 90% target, with December the 23rd and February the 23rd showing as red, but still above 75% compliance. The 2 KPIs relating to the numbers of overdue requests and average number of days requests are overdue are showing as red by default. The tolerance levels aligned to these 2 KPIs are currently being reviewed to show a more realistic picture. The information compliance team continue to provide regular management information to directorates to improve their compliance rates. Historically, Dorset Council and previously Dorset County Council has struggled to comply with subject access request timescales. The number of SARs received has increased by approximately 24% every year. While still falling generally below the 90% target, significant improvements have been made within the last 12 months. Children's Services established a dedicated SARS team, and these transferred to Assurance in January 2022 to provide better alignment with other information compliance skill sets. As a result of this dedicated resource and a review of processes and practices, the backlog of cases has now been largely processed. SARs vary in complexity. It is a small number of very complex care leave requests that largely drive the red reporting. With a significant backlog now removed, it is envisaged that the performance will improve, but realistically, responding to the most complex cases within timescales will remain a challenge. Cases above team capacity and/or deemed very complex are generally outsourced to an external provider, which has improved performance. A redaction software project is underway to look at to improve team efficiency further. And that's the end of that Chairman's briefing note. Could I take this opportunity to ask Councillors Brown, Gorringe and Shortell to monitor on the performance dashboard, please, as part of your requirement. Thank you. If I now move to the other Chairman's update, 20-mile-per-hour policy, the 6-month progress update, The briefing note provided by Mr. Tony Burden, a road safety manager, and it's to be read out by my Vice Chairman, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a 6-monthly progress update report on the Council's 20-mile-an-hour speed limit policy. The new 20-mile-an-hour speed limit policy was agreed by Cabinet on the 1st of November 2022, and shortly afterwards a dedicated website, 20-mile-per-hour limits and zones-Dorset Council, was made available, providing guidance to the community and an easy-to-use online application form. The policy was communicated through the regular news channels. New 20-mile-an-hour application launched for town and parishes, Dorset Council News, and the Road Safety Manager further promoted this work by engaging with DAPTC through a webinar, which at that time was the highest attended with 62 delegates. To date, there have been 12 community applications with a further 32 areas that have expressed interest or are actively working on an application. The Road Safety Manager and the local community highway teams have been actively engaging with several ward members and parish town councils to provide guidance. On the 27th of April this year, a newly formed 20-mile-an-hour panel group comprising the portfolio holder for highways, transport planning, transport planning team leader, transport planning implementation manager, and road safety manager met to consider 8 applications which formed part of the first phase. Phase 1 applications are those submitted before the 1st of March 2023. The panel agreed that 5 applications met the criteria, 1 didn't meet the criteria, 1 required further investigative work, and 1 parish council paused their application to consider an alternative application for a speed indicator device, but staying with the existing 30 miles an hour. The next panel group meeting will consider applications made between the 1st of March 2023 and the 31st of August 2023, and this will be known as Phase 2. An assessment is now underway to fully understand the cost implications of these 5 applications before a decision is made on the funding arrangements, and the applications are progressed towards the formal traffic regulation order public consultation process. The relevant local members and parish town councils have all been updated with the result of the panel meeting. In addition to the community requests, the Highways Development Team will be advising developers that Dorset Council require them to implement 20 miles an hour within new residential streets, and wherever possible, they are to avoid unnecessary street clutter. Dorset Police have made clear that they will enforce 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, and these measures are regularly discussed within the Dorset Road Safety Partnership. A more formal 12-month review will be undertaken later this year, and a report prepared for the Scrutiny Committee, presumably in the new year. That concludes that report.
Thank you, Councillor Canning. Okay, I'll now move to agenda item 5, public participation. We have a number of questions this morning. Unfortunately, Mr. Mole, Mr. Davis and Mrs. Mole are unable to be with us, but they will receive a written reply from officers. So if I can move to my first question from the member of the public, Mr. David Frankel, to ask his question, please.
Apologies, but I've not heard one word that's been said this morning. The acoustics here are awful. I've not understood or heard one word, but I'll read my question because I assume it's the right time. I'm a chartered civil engineer from Ferndale. Many studies have shown that driving at 20 miles an hour produces less pollution than when driving at 30 miles an hour, and also reduces the number and severity of accidents. The Dorset Council policy on 20 mile an hour speed limits thwarts attempts by residents and town and parish councils by imposing criteria that are not included in any DFT guidance, such as a requirement to have a community speed watch in place. So my question is, why does Dorset Council not actively promote 20 mile an hour as a default driving speed in areas where people and vehicular traffic mix? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frankel. If I could now move to the Chairman of Fontmell Magna Parish Council, Councillor Laura Curtin, please.
Thank you. We were dismayed and shocked to have our application for a 20 mile mile/hour speed limit on the A350 in Fontmell Magna turned down. Dorset councillors are not honouring the obligation to create a safe road environment which is fit for purpose and to fully take into account the composition of road users, including quality of life and the needs of vulnerable road users on the A350. With overwhelming support for our application from those who live here and and no identified third party objecting to our wishes, this is a curious day for democracy in local government. The rejection letter received loosely mentions reasons which we do not believe stand up to informed scrutiny or justify the continuation of dangerously high traffic speeds on roads without pavements where we would expect to safely walk or ride. Sadly, over time, our roads have not been adequately engineered or otherwise controlled to maintain normally accepted levels of safety. Recently, the national organiser of the 20s Plenty group said words to the effect that, with more than 100 local authorities in the UK, no local authority throws up more barriers to safe speeds than Dorset. The Dorset policy, as applied, appears to maintain our position as the slowest ship in the convoy, when it comes to bringing our road regulation into line with modern standards. An explanation for unsuccessful applicants has been promised, and we look forward to arranging that part of the new process. We have alarming and deteriorating road safety information which has been shared with Dorset Highways and councillors. Levels of speed offending have become many times higher than the average for the country on roads with unsuitably high speed limits in place, and which are notoriously not fit for purpose. Our unique situation of not having pavements can be made safer with cheap and effective traffic speed controls, similar to those which have been widely introduced across most of the Western world in recent years. So the question is, why do Dorset councillors feel that in ignoring our wishes, it is reasonable for too many residents of Fontmell Magna to be frightened to cross the road to visit their neighbours, walk their dogs, or do normal everyday activities on footways in the village? Thank you, Fontmell Magna Parish Council.
Thank you, Councillor Curtin. I'll now ask Mr Wiltshire if he could respond, please.
Thank you, Chair. I shall respond in my position as Head of Highways for Dorset Council. The Chairman's update highlights the actions taken by Dorset Council to deliver on a new policy which will result in an increased number of 20-mile-per-hour schemes. The new policy does not seek to set a 20-mile-an-hour limit as the default for all roads where people and vehicular traffic mix, but has taken a consistent approach to dealing with applications with a policy that complies with national guidance, is deliverable within designated budgets, and is enforceable by the police. The national guidance underpinning this policy is indeed 10 years old. The Department for Transport have not consulted with Dorset Council on any potential changes on this guidance. Until we receive new guidance, it is important that we adhere to current national guidance. The current policy seeks to make 20 miles per hour the norm for new residential developments, and is clear that 20-mile-per-hour limits will be considered for urban areas and village streets that are primarily residential. On the 28th of April, Fontmell Magna Parish Council were advised that the 20-mile-per-hour panel group had assessed their application and that it did not meet the criteria set out in the policy. However, I recognise that road safety remains a concern for this local community, and our community highways officers and our road safety team continue to work with the Parish Council to see how safety can be improved. The safety concern relating to the lack of footway on the bend in the village is a complex matter to consider, with improvement options being limited due to the significant constraints on this part of the A350. Ensuring that the village has the appropriate level of safety signage when balanced against the need to keep signs, lines and street furniture to a minimum has also been a key consideration. Dorset Council supported the Parish Council's request for a new speed indicator device, which I'll call a SID from here on, at 3 locations in the village, which is a new intervention within the village. Within the last few weeks, the SID has become operational, and this will help to promote the reduction in speeds and increase the feeling of safety, which will be supplemented by the fantastic work of the Community Speed Walk team. Dorset Council is a member of the Dorset Road Safety Partnership, and we are working with partnership colleagues, including Dorset Police, who operate the Community Safety Watch scheme and speed camera enforcement measures. The partnership has an ambition to increase the overall level of community speed watch capability across Dorset Council area, and that is why the 20-mile-per-hour policy strongly encourages communities to try and establish a community speed watch team as part of their application process. However, it is important to recognise that an inability to establish a local community speed watch will not lead to a 20-mile-per-hour application being blocked. Recent concerns have been raised regarding the perception of increased speeding at the Spring Meadows junction in Fontenoy Magna as a result of changes to the road layout linked to the new housing development. As a result, a speed survey is being commissioned to understand whether there has been an actual increase. This will coincide with the developer undertaking a road safety audit with any remedial work being identified and addressed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wiltshire. For transparency, we've also received 3 statements. Oh, I beg your pardon. Apparently we have a Mr. Lisgartside online who's joining us as well, apparently. Ms. Gartside, would you like to ask your question? Apologies, members and officers. So for transparency, we've had 3 statements received from Mr. Robert McCurrick, Mr. Michael Hobbs, and M&F Turnbull. Those statements will receive a written response, as will all of the questions received. And I'll just go back to Ms. Gartside, who's joined us online, to see if she's there yet. Ms. Gartside, are you able to join us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Continue, Ms. Gartside. Can you ask your question, please? Ms. Gartside, you might be muted.
Okay. Wait a minute. Device speaker. Let's try this again. Can you hear me yet?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me yet?
Ms. Gartside, we can hear you. Yes, continue.
Can you hear me yet? Are you able to hear me?
Ms. Gartside, we can hear you. Yes, continue.
Good, excellent, thank you. I'm sorry, I've been trying every possible device. I'm standing in a German railway station at the moment, pressing buttons, so my apologies if there's any noise. I've been here half an hour. My question, please, to Mr. Chairman is, having campaigned hard last year successfully to include an A and B road categories, please may I know how many of these schemes approved by DC to date under its current policy include an A or a B road? And that is my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gartside. And I will ask Mr. Wiltshire to respond, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just read through the 5 schemes which have been approved and state the road classifications. So B3069 Langton Matravers, the C8/C136 at Winfrith Newborough, the B3082 Wimborne Town Centre, which is an extension to the current 20 mile per hour, the B3162/B3157 Bridport Town Centre, which links into the existing 20 mile per hour, and the C47 Pimpern, which does not include the A354, which runs through the village. Out of the 5 applications that will progress to the next stage, there were none that were on an A classification road. There were 3 which were on a B classification road and 2 that were on a C classification road. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Wiltshire. And thank you, Ms Gartside, and thank you to our other members of the public. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you wish, or you can leave if you would like, if you've got something better to be doing with your time. But thank you for your time this morning. Thank you, members of the public. Okay, if I move to agenda item 6, questions from councillors. Ms Watson.
We have no questions from councillors on this occasion.
Thank you, Ms Watson. I'll move to agenda item 7, a review of the 3rd Bournemouth and Poole and Dorset Local Transport Plan. This is a substantive item this morning. The recommendation is that we ask that the committee considers the information provided in this report and background paper and notes the achievements of the LTP3 against the key performance indicators since 2017. Comments are sought in respect of LTP3 and will be considered during planning for LTP4. And I believe our presenters are Ms Helen Jackson, Principal Transport Planner, and Mr Owen Clark, Strategic and Policy Team Manager, to present, including a PowerPoint presentation. And members, as per usual, I would ask that questions wait till the end of the presentation. And if members can refer to the slide or if they want to refer back to that. Thank you. Over to the presenters.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start by running through some of the key points of LTP3. Firstly, I must highlight that the purpose of this report is to look back at LTP3. This includes a review of the achievements measured against the performance indicators, some examples of transport interventions that have been delivered since 2017, and a high-level financial overview. The joint LTP3 covers a geographical area of Dorset, which included Christchurch at the time of writing in 2011, and Bournemouth and Poole, which takes into account the travel to work areas in southeast Dorset, especially the commuting between the former East Dorset area and the conurbation. There have been several changes since 2011. On a national level, we have seen national policy changes, Brexit, the climate emergency, health and well-being, COVID, and advances in technology, such as the growth of electric cars. Regionally, we've seen the formation of the subnational transport bodies, of which Dorset is part of the Western Gateway subnational transport body. And locally, we have become unitary authorities in 2019, so Dorset Council and BCP Council. And at a local level, we've also seen the formation of the Dorset Local Enterprise Partnership. So the overarching vision for LTP3 is a safe, reliable and accessible low-carbon transport system for Bournemouth, Poole and Dorset that assists in the development of a strong, low-carbon economy, maximises the opportunities for sustainable transport and respects and protects the area's unique environmental assets. The LTP goals are supporting economic growth, tackling climate change, equality of opportunity, better safety, security and health, and improve quality of life. The LTP goals and the vision, the overarching vision for LTP3 are still very relevant today. So the plan sets out a series of strategy measures to meet the vision and goals, which are reducing the need to travel, managing and maintaining the existing network more efficiently, active travel and smarter travel choices, public transport alternatives to the car parking measures, travel safety measures, and strategic infrastructure improvements. So progress since 2017. We have continued to publish annual progress reports and implementation plans up to 2017. Hence, we're reporting on progress since 2017. All of these schemes, whether large or small scale, have had some LTP funding. So firstly, looking at the major schemes, the big programme, the Bournemouth International Growth Programme, the main objective was improving access to Bournemouth Airport and the major employment site at Aviation Park. This programme included highways improvements such as junction improvements on the B3073 and the A338. Gillingham Access to Growth. This is a package of measures including junction improvements and sustainable transport measures to support the major housing and employment growth within the town. Most funding came from government funding via the Dorset Local Enterprise Partnership. And Transforming Cities Fund. Dorset Council and BCP Council jointly secured £79 million in funding to invest in schemes to promote active travel and bus services along 6 key corridors in South East Dorset. Now, some examples of smaller schemes. Sustrans Bike It project. This is an ongoing project delivered in partnership with Sustrans, which promotes active travel to schools across Dorset, including encouraging walking, cycling and scooting. The Wool Cycleway. This provides a cycle route linking Wool Station to Dorset Innovation Park. This was funded jointly by LTP funding and also through Section 106 developer funding. There's now also a Wool Beryl Bike cycle hire scheme that has been part funded by Section 106 money and South Western Railway, which helps to increase usage of this cycleway. The Custom House Quay in Weymouth. This scheme has improved the public space along Custom House Quay to create a safer space for walking and cycling, enhance the area for outside dining and improve air quality by reducing traffic along the route by removing parking. This scheme was part funded through the Active Travel Fund. Dorchester Junction improvements. The purpose of the improvements was to make the environment and accessibility of the town centre better for cyclists and pedestrians and the mobility impaired, while maintaining vehicular access and supporting economic prosperity. The junction improvements that have been completed in recent years include Great Western Cross Junction, improving the crossing for pedestrians on Princes Street Junction for the entrance to the Borough Gardens, improvements to the top of town roundabout, and the pedestrianisation of Lower South Street. And the Castleman Trailway in East Dorset. This is a cycling, walking and horse riding route following the old Southampton to Dorchester railway line. This provides a connecting off-road link for settlements between Ringwood and Poole. Through external funding and LTP money, we have made improvements to this route. So the LTP3 performance indicators, monitoring LTP performance of delivery of the strategy against the LTP goals is an essential part of the process, as it provides a feedback mechanism whereby the programme can be adjusted according to actual performance and the contribution towards the key goals. The key findings were measured against the baseline data, which is set as the 2008 to 2010 average. So for carbon emissions and traffic levels, travel in Dorset was significantly affected by the COVID pandemic, which had clear impacts on travel behaviours. Journeys were influenced by the sharp reduction in the ability to travel over a 24-month period of the planned period. Traffic levels dropped significantly in 2020 due to COVID, slowly returning to near normal levels in 2021. Carbon emissions have also dropped as a result of less traffic. Buses. There's been a significant decline in bus patronage and passenger satisfaction. The key issues identified are infrequent bus services, poor coverage in rural areas, and affordability. Connections between different modes of transport has also been highlighted. It's worth mentioning here that there was a significant cut in government funding for bus services in 2016-2017, which has impacted upon the rural areas. Highways maintenance. The overall condition of the A, B and C class roads across Dorset has improved since the baseline in 2008 to 2010. Road safety. The number of road-related casualties is nearly halved across Dorset since the baseline. Active travel. As more walking and cycling infrastructure is completed across the county, it encourages more people to use active travel for their daily journeys. And alternative fuels. The number of EV cars in Dorset has increased by 36,000% since the baseline in 2008 to 10, when it was virtually zero. We have been installing electric vehicle charge points in public car parks across Dorset to meet the needs of the increasing numbers of electric vehicles. Most of this funding is through successful bids to government and part funding through the LTP. So LTP funding. Dorset's annual allocation of 1.9 million is the third lowest allocation to a county or shire council in the country. This allocation has not increased since 2015 or 16, and due to inflation is now worth considerably less. The funding formula is based upon the following factors: public transport, accessibility, tackling pollution, road safety, congestion, and carbon. The weightings for these factors tends to favour the urban areas, hence they get more funding than rural areas. The constrained budget. All LTP scheme requests have to go through a prioritisation process based on the LTP goals, as we receive many more requests for LTP funding than we can afford. Levering in funding for scheme delivery is essential. Without other funding sources, quite simply, the LTP couldn't afford to deliver schemes. This approach has successfully secured additional investment in the Dorset area, totalling over £25 million for major funding from external sources over the last 5 years. The majority of funding between 2020 to 2023 has been spent on strategic infrastructure improvements, which includes schemes delivered under the Transforming Cities Fund programme, followed by local active travel and greener travel choices. The transition to LTP4. We are waiting for the new LTP guidance from government, which is expected late June. In the meantime, we have started working on the new joint LTP4. This work is developing the evidence and baseline, and to date has included a review of LTP best practice, a review of the joint Local Transport Plan 3, analysis of socio-economic data, and carbon baselining. The next steps will include developing the vision and objectives for LTP4, which will derive from the issues and opportunities identified in the evidence base. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Jackson. Very comprehensive report. Thank you very much. So if I now move to the portfolio, Councillor Ray Bryant for Highways, Travel and Environment, and give the opportunity for the portfolio holder to make any comments he wishes to make at this point.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm Councillor Ray Bryant, portfolio holder, Highways, Travel and Environment. The report you've seen in front of you today, whilst being very comprehensive, is actually quite depressing in many ways. But it does show, with the limited money that we've received from central government, we have achieved an awful lot during the lifetime of this council. And considering we've had the pandemic in the middle, I take my hat off to the team for what they have achieved. There have been a number of improvements that we've seen in all sections. The only section that I feel the most uncomfortable on is obviously our public transport, where we received a nominal amount of 800,000 plus last week. And considering our original bid was for close on 100 million, I find that totally unacceptable and have gone into writing with the Minister to explain my feelings. But I have to congratulate the team for what they've delivered in a very tight budget, and I'm sure that people will appreciate that the work isn't easy. It does some of the repair work does disrupt the general public, and I'm grateful for their cooperation whilst we go through this phase. But all in all, I think the report is excellent, and I think the council should be congratulated on what they've achieved. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. I'll now move to invite any non-committee members who wish to ask any questions or to speak. I'll move to questions from committee members. So, members, Councillor Trite.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a quick question on funding. It's seeking clarification. On page 17, under financial implications, we say that Dorset Council gets an annual integrated transport block capital allocation, which is the third lowest in the country. Now, is that the third lowest in absolute terms by a straight comparison with other counties, or is it more meaningfully per head of population, or, I don't know, per unit length of road or something like that? Because it's not very helpful just as a straight comparison with counties which may be very much larger than Dorset.
Response from officers, please.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, it's a direct comparison of the funding awarded per authority area. So we haven't done that analysis of funding per population.
Misleading and therefore unhelpful.
That is something that we could look at, Chair, and correct that issue.
Thank you. I mean, do you have, I'll come to you in a minute, Mr. Wiltshire. Do you have any, I agree with Councillor Trite, do you have any sort of context on how we compare it actually within the South West region, taking it as a region?
I don't have those figures to hand, but I can provide those to the committee.
Thank you. I think, as Councillor Trite says, it would be interesting to know. Mr. Wiltshire, you wish to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I will politely push back on the comment that it's misleading. We really do struggle within Dorset for the LTP funding that we get, and this is it's for improvements to our road infrastructure. It's for reducing the number of killed and seriously injured people. We've got a road network of just under 4,000 kilometres, which is quite a long road network compared to many of the other authorities in the country. But we don't get funding per kilometre. We get funding as has been outlined in the report, and that is not favourable for us. So we end up with a situation where we have a very long road network comparatively, but we can do very little in terms of investing into that network with DFT funding because it is proportionally so small. The closest comparison, I think, is saying that we get just under £2 million per year from LTP funding from Department for Transport, whereas our neighbours in BCP get £3 million. So a much smaller network. I think their network is about 800 kilometres, so I'm far smaller than ours. But as has been outlined in the report, with public infrastructure, with public transport, the formula does not help a shire county, and it is very difficult for us to invest that money into things like road safety measures when it is spread so thinly? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wiltshire. One of the things that surprised me, and I'll put you on standby, Councillor Bryant, because this is more of a political question, that there is no increase in funding since 2015-16. Why is there no incremental increase from funding from government year on year? It's surely obvious to everyone that there's going to be an increase in cost of materials as time goes on, increasing costs in wages year on year. I just wondered whether you had a view on that, Councillor Bryant.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's something that we are taking up with the DfT as we speak, because you're absolutely right. We're facing circa 30% increase in the increasing cost of materials, not least of all with the blacktop, which is an oil-derived product. So we are having conversations with the DfT, and I'm seeking help from our local members of Parliament to get our voice heard in Parliament about the unfair treatment of Dorset.
Thank you, Councillor Bryant. That's the answer I wanted to hear, actually. I think we do need to take that argument to government, I think. Thank you. Councillor Took.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at Table 1 on page 15 of the report that was attached to the agenda, the first element in that is reducing the need to travel, encouraging and supporting new development to be located and designed in ways that people can meet their day-to-day needs with less overall need to travel and by sustainable modes. We've just heard that public transport is quite poor within the county, but this also has implications for planning. So where we're looking at major developments of several hundred houses, surely that means that these need to be in places where there are existing good transport links, rather than in more isolated communities. And I confess to a parochial interest in this, in that there's a plan to put 1,700 houses in the village of Alderholt in the east, which is served by a network of very poor roads. And the idea of creating a dormitories town where people must travel out with little public transport seems perverse. And I'd just like to know, to what extent are we driving planning from this principle of reducing the need to travel and to have new development located and designed in ways that people could meet their day-to-day needs. So I think that's an important thing that we need to make sure is happening, and that highways and planning need to be tied together quite closely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Took. I think we're talking strategic and spatial planning. Did any comment from any officer? Ms Jackson?
Yes, Chair, if I just take that one, completely agree with Councillor Toot's comments. The transport planning team, we do work very closely with our colleagues in the local plan team, and we are involved with discussions over all of the site allocations in the emerging local plan, and we also work very closely with our colleagues actually dealing with planning applications as well. So, you know, we are very well connected, and we do have very frequent discussions with them. So we are joined up in our approach to developing the local plan.
Thank you, and thank you for the answer. What is the actual effect of your concept? Are you pushing this principle that you can't be creating dormitory villages, dormitory areas, or is this simply I'm not quite sure how to put this, but how strongly are you pushing this this idea of development in the right place? Because it seems to me that there's an awful lot of developments that are being pushed through that are in inappropriate places in terms of local transport. But if you could help with that, thank you.
If I can just go to Councillor Lacey-Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. That's very much more of a political question, I believe. We are pushing very strongly with planning because we always want the right developments in the right place. However, it is not an actual point of planning you can decide an application on. So in real terms, as Councillor Took is alluding to, we can't turn down a planning application because there is not a bus route. All we can do is work with the strategic level to try to push those kinds of larger developments to either include local transport plans and links and the whole kind of 10-minute communities, but we can't actually decide an application based on it. That's not something we can do. But please be rest assured that politically, we are pushing very hard strategically to make sure that all planning applications are in the right place.
Thank you. And I take Councillor Took's point. I think it's something like 83% of land in Dorset can't be built on because it's SSI or AONB or Greenbelt or whatever. And that trying to create these dormitory towns, villages, with a very poor road infrastructure that already leads into them, one does wonder where the money is going to come to actually improve those road infrastructures, would be considerable, would have to be government, and being as we're already appear to be at the bottom of the pile anyway in funding, it is a concern, I think, for planning and for strategic and spatial planning within this county. So it's a very good point, well made, I think, Councillor Took. Do I have any other questions from members? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the strategic aims for LTP3, I think it's probably fair to say that although all of them are incredibly important, if one must be sort of raised above the rest, that would be in relation to road safety. I think that would be roughly a universally supported statement. So first of all, I wanted to credit the team with the 43% reduction in casualties since the baseline period, because at the end of the day, that is 43% less people who have either not passed away or received a serious injury on our road network. But I was hoping to dive a little deeper and understand what the team's assessment is in relation to that percentage. Does that relate, in your mind, solely to carriageway improvements, or does that also have an impact on emerging technologies within car safety as well? And where does that balance fit?
Officers to answer.
So within the LTP programme, there'll be a balance of different scale of road safety schemes. Some of those will be to tackle very local issues, community safety type issues, and others will be more significant strategic type road improvements to address safety issues on routes. I don't know the specifics of the balance. I think that would be a conversation that we could pick up with the road safety team specifically and the road safety manager and come back to you on that.
Thank you, Chair. I was expecting something along those lines, I must admit, but I think it's probably fair to say it is a mixture of both. In terms of the revolution in car safety, one of the big things to me as a layman that seems to be coming down the line is autonomous vehicles. Because if we look at the UK government's statistics for the causes of crashes last year, out of the top 5 reasons, 4 could be broadly categorised as human error. We are the weak link in the network, if that makes sense. So as the developments in self-driving or driverless vehicles are coming down the line, how is that going to feature in LTP4? Is the Department of Transport, yourself, are we in communication with car manufacturers to understand the limitations of current technology and how we can ensure that the design processes and design standards we use on our road network are aligned to maximise that technology as much as possible in obviously in the long-term hope of reducing road injuries?
Officer to respond, please.
Thank you, Chair. As as you mentioned, but looking forward for LTP4 is actually going to be a subject for a separate committee, so we need to be careful not to jump the gun. But yeah, to answer your specific questions there, yes, we're talking with Department for Transport. They will engage with us, I'm sure, in terms of what new designs come about. What we're hearing at the moment is actually is decent lining and things that the vehicle itself needs to be able to pick up on. So it's not about completely redesigning roads, but it's making sure that the sensors in the vehicles can understand where it is in terms of its relation or position within the road, and then tie that into satellite navigation systems. But absolutely, as guidance comes through, and certainly as part of LTP4, I'm expecting that we'll get a far stronger requirement from the Department for Transport to say what areas of road network we need to enhance to enable these vehicles to use our roads. And recognising that our roads are very different, I think, to driving an autonomous vehicle down a motorway. If you're going down one of Dorset's rural roads and there aren't any lines on that, and that vehicle is looking for a centre line, it's going to struggle. So absolutely points that we need to pick up in the future.
Not a question, but more of a statement that I think part of the point I wanted to highlight is that the LTP3 sort of period from 2011 to 2026 is a long period, and the development in technology is moving very quickly in this space, and just making sure that we learn from this period that we are able to build some flexibility into LTP4 as well. But I was expecting sort of very similar answers to what's been highlighted, but just because I've always found the national debate, particularly around things like smart motorways, very interesting. So statistically, they are not as safe as a normal motorway, but they're nowhere near as dangerous as a country road, which all of our residents, the vast majority of our residents will traverse on a daily basis going to and from work. And I just want to make sure that Dorset isn't left behind in this revolution as well. And I think we need to be making sure we're banging the drum for rural councils, as I know Dorset Council is very proud of doing, but I want to encourage our highways colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor John Andrews from Sherborne. No. A lot of my 17 questions have been answered by fellow colleagues. Thank you very much for asking them all. I have to agree with Councillor Bryan. We do a remarkable job on our highways. Having recently visited East Devon, Exmouth. If I was in a smart car, I would have probably lost it down one or two of the potholes that are down there. So it's, it's a credit to all our highways team, what they do. My questions, however, are do we, as a council, identify accident black spots in an attempt to cull the overriding injuries and accidents that do occur on some of our major junctions? I just wondered if we do that as part of policy.
Before officers answer that, I just add something to that, if you don't mind, Councillor Andrews, and it was with regards to fatalities and collisions on Dorset Council roads. Do we have an ability to do a breakdown of how many are Dorset residents and how many are visitors or tourists to the area not familiar with our roads, which I suspect the police will have that information? Can this information be used, if it exists, to give us an understanding whether road layout and road signage is contributing to the fatalities and collisions by motorists with no local knowledge? Which I think joins with your question, Councillor Andrews. If our officers able to answer that, I appreciate it's information you probably haven't got readily to hand, but it would be interesting to know whether that does have an impact on how we design and sign our road system. Thank you.
So yes, there is a regular analysis undertaken of cluster sites. So sites where there is a number of accidents have occurred over a five-year period, and they will be looked at in more detail. So that happens on a regular basis by the road safety team. And to improve our understanding of road safety, we are working with the Road Safety Partnership and Dorset Police to get better information on non-fatal accidents, so near misses that are occurring on the road network, so we can sort of see in advance where there are other issues occurring. in terms of the specific question on the data and the breakdown by resident and visitor, I think that's a question that we'd have to take back to the road safety team and the team that undertake that analysis.
Yeah, thank you. I'd appreciate if that was done, because I think that would give us then a good idea around whether it's our road layouts and our signages have an impact on tourists and visitors to Dorset area, being obviously that we're a tourist destination. Obviously, we all know that driving on Dorset roads, if you've got the local knowledge, it's hugely beneficial. Going back to Councillor Brown's point about a rural road network, which can be quite dangerous to drive on, but if you have the local knowledge, obviously it's extremely beneficial to you. So I appreciate if officers could take that away and do some work on that. Councillor Lacey Clark.
Chairman, it might be interesting to the committee to find out. So we have a set of agreements, I think it's called Stat 19 with Dorset Police, where they share with us certain information about the fatal and life-changing accidents and collisions, but not the rest of the smaller situations and near misses that occur. We're currently working with them in a joint operation to try to get them to share that information, and also to find a really good data analysis to go through all of the information of even the people that phone up the police or phone up 111 and say, I've just had a small bump, there's no injuries, the police wouldn't attend, but the police still take that information. And if they can pass that information to us, so we can then go through and analyse it all, we can then find out where the near misses and the real intricacies of that data, to then find ways that we need to be looking at solving those small, low-level incidents that happen on our roads, which would then help with the cluster spots.
Thank you, Councillor Lacey Clark. That's very interesting information. Thank you. Councillor Andrews, did you wish to come back?
Yeah, so I didn't really get an answer to my question whether we actually put caution accident black box, but I can come to that. I was looking at, well, unfortunately, in market towns like Sherborne, Wimborne, Blandford and Shaftesbury, etc., we're small market towns with small streets, so active travel and cycle lanes are probably not a probability, except when you get outside of that, those are central market town facilities. I looked at page 26, and it says about promoting active travel to schools and developing that side of things. Well, our lessons have been learnt in Sherborne. We built a school many years ago outside of the town, well, right on the outskirts of the town, in the Abbey School it is now, in an attempt to make people walk and cycle to school. Problem is, it's a small road, narrow road. And guess what? The traffic congestion around that school at the end of school time, because on the outskirts of town, is horrendous, as Councillor Bryan will know, because he's visited and got told where to go when he got told asked somebody to switch their engine off because they were polluting the atmosphere. So it's something we need to take in mind, and I know it's probably planning related as well, but building schools on the outskirts of towns, it's just, in our experience, especially in Market Town, was ridiculous. I don't think I've got anything else to ask because everybody else has asked questions and I'll repeat them. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. I'm sure you'll find something else as we continue with the debate. Did officers wish to make any comment at that point? No?
Mrs. Jackson highlighted the work that we do with Sustrans on the Bike It project with schools. So they go into a number of schools across Dorset and they work very closely with them to monitor the level of different modes used to access the schools. They run a series of events with the schools and the pupils within those schools to show how pupils how to use their bikes safely, how to maintain their bikes, and it is a successful program in trying to encourage that mode shift and encourage more people to walk and cycle.
Chair, I'll just come back on that. So we have two primary schools in Sherborne, the Abbey School, which everybody drives to, or a lot of the people drive to, the ones that are really local walk. But we have another school, the Sherborne Primary School in the northeast of the town, which is in the middle of the urban area, where the majority of people walk or cycle to school. It's the other way around with the one on the outskirts. So when we're looking at travel and when we're being asked as a travel plan to build new schools or put extension on schools, we strategically need to have a look at that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. I think the ongoing problem with schools as well is, as I understand it, there's no defined catchment areas anymore, so parents are able to travel some considerable distance if they wish their children to attend that school, which obviously we all know is impacting during those school times of going in and coming out again. Can I just ask, on page 16 at 1.12 at 1, if we increase the 20-mile-per-hour zones, do we have an understanding how these will affect carbon emission forecasts and how much less efficient is the modern combustion engine if restricted to 20 miles per hour? Are officers given that any thought to how they're going to LTP4? We presume we're going to see a lot more 20-mile-an-hour zones, and how is that going to affect our carbon emission forecasts? Thank you.
This does stray very much into what we would be preparing the report for the Resources Committee for the July report that we're preparing. But one of the significant changes for LTP4 will be around the measurement of carbon, the carbon baseline, so we understand the position now, but then testing different policies, different interventions to see what the impact of those will be going forward. And that will be a requirement within the new LTP guidance that we're expecting, that we follow that methodology and that there's far more of a focus on the carbon emissions and understanding those. So it will be something that we're looking at as part of that process, and there'll be tools that we use to complete that work.
Thank you. So if I can... I'll come back to you in a minute, Councillor Bragg, because I've got another question to that one. For me, the obvious question is, why is the guidance from government for LTP4 is delayed and the government has committed this country to significant reductions of CO2 emissions over an ambitious time frame? How are local authorities like Dorset Council expected to play their part if they are not given the tools to do the job? And I have got a note in here to say Councillor Bryan to answer. But on the first part of my question, if the officers wanted to answer, otherwise I'll go straight to Councillor Bryan. I'll go straight to Councillor Bryan.
Right, you put me on the spot there because I was writing down the question I wanted to ask you, so I didn't forget it. So can I be ask the question again, please?
For me, Councillor Bryan, the obvious question is, why is the guidance from government for LTP4, why is it delayed? The government has committed this country to significant reductions of CO2 emissions over an ambitious time frame. How are local authorities like Dorset Council expected to play their part if they are not given the tools to do the job? And I go further than that also, is there any noise that's coming out of Westminster to say that if council authorities don't actually achieve what they're going to be set, will they be penalised? Is there any discussions around that? Thank you.
Yeah, in answer to the second part of the question, I haven't heard of any penalties that have been placed on councils for not delivering. That's to the best of my knowledge. Obviously, there might be something happening behind the scenes that we don't know about. I think the frustration is that this has been delayed on several occasions. We need to have the local transport plan linked to our local plan going forward. The two have to work hand in hand. Councillor David Walsh and I regularly talk on this to make sure that we're putting a joint statements forward to government, but it still hasn't hurried up the fact that we're still waiting for the details of what they want us to achieve. It's extremely frustrating, and it's something that very recently Councillor Walsh and I actually took up with government, but we haven't as yet had a response.
Just come back on what you said there, Councillor Bryan. That if council authorities are being left to their own devices to achieve the reduction in CO2 limitations that the government have set nationally that they want us to achieve, There does beg a question there, which is why I asked whether council authorities are going to be penalised at some point in the future and whether there was any noise coming out of Westminster around that, because there'll be council authorities like Dorset that are trying to achieve significant CO2 reductions over a time frame, and whether other council authorities in the country are, to put it in the easiest terms, dragging their feet over it, because Dorset Council is paying a significant amount of its budget to achieve what we're trying to achieve and to do the right thing at this present point in time that we're seeing with our climate emergency. So that's why I raised the issue. I don't know if you want to make any other further comment on that, but it is incumbent on all council authorities to try and do what they need to do and to achieve the government's targets. And I suspect there will be councils through finances, financial positions that won't actually be achieving their targets in the same sort of time frame. Fair comment. If you like to.
One of my frustrations has always been that there are councils around who are buying their way out of taking the actions by buying carbon credits. We as a council have never gone down that road. And don't intend to go down that road. I'm not saying it won't be the end result as we get closer to 2050 or 2040. But at the moment, everything we do is reducing carbon emissions by our actions, not from guidance from central government. And picking up a comment that was passed earlier on about the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, one of the bits that I've been looking at recently is the increase in carbon emissions with the lower speed limits, where you tend to be travelling in a lower gear, therefore are likely to be emitting more carbon than you would at, say, 30 miles an hour. These are all issues that we have to take very seriously when we plan going forward, because we have to comply with our own climate agenda. We've made that very clear. But the highways team look at it slightly differently. And as I say, we've heard this morning about the requests for more 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, but we have to get the balance right. And that's very important going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Bryant. I'm glad I asked the question. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about LTP3 and any outstanding works that are sort of underway or could be underway but haven't yet progressed. For example, you mentioned in your presentation about the changes to the junctions in Dorchester, which a cross-council group of councillors oversaw as part of the DTEP process. And there was one outstanding junction that wasn't affordable under the previously, and it does seem strange that we made changes to 4, maybe 5 junctions in the town centre, but there's one outstanding one that hasn't progressed since. In fact, nothing's happened since 2019. I just wondered if there was any commitment or finances or ability to actually to finish that project, basically.
If it's the Mornbury junction that you're referring to, my understanding is that there is detailed design work currently happening to take that scheme forward within the LTP programme and using some match funding from other sources.
Thank you very much. I think the difficulty is that the councillors who worked on this in the past haven't heard anything for a long time, and we weren't sure whether, well, basically what would happen to projects that weren't finished by 2026. Do they automatically roll over into LTP4, or because LTP4 is a different beast, does everything have to be looked at again?
As part of the process for developing LTP4, we will review those schemes that are currently part of the LTP3 programme and look at how they fit with the new vision, the new objectives, our new priorities for LTP4, and whether we then carry those forward. So I can't say at this stage which schemes would get carried forward, but that will be part of the kind of review process and preparation of the new LTP.
My next speaker is Councillor Took.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on the point I was making earlier and a response to Councillor Lacey Clark, who mentioned that highways were not a reason for planning refusals. I just recommend him to look at paragraphs 104, 105 and 106 of the NPPF. Paragraph 105 in particular says the planning system should actively maintain patterns of growth in support of the objectives from para 104. Significant development should be focused on locations which are or can be made sustainable through limiting the need to travel and offering a genuine choice of transport modes. And it ends up, this should be taken into account in both plan making and decision making. So I think we can use transport and the lack of suitable transport and infrastructure in the planning argument. And I go back to the point I made before, which is how strongly are the highways team talking to planning and saying, this is going to be a very poor outcome if you put a lot of houses here. And we need that discussion to happen. That was what I was trying to say earlier. And I'll leave it there. And if anyone wants to respond, I'll welcome it.
Thank you, Councillor Took. Yeah, I think Councillor Bryan. I know you're having talks with your colleague all the time, Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, this is something quite close to my heart because every time I see a planning application, the highways comment on it tends to be a one-liner, and I think we need to address that and go into far more detail. It's something I've taken up with the corporate director responsible, and I'm looking forward to receiving the opportunity to address this, because Councillor Took is absolutely right. Transport is absolutely essential as we expand the housing numbers going forward. I would love to see at least a paragraph in every planning application that refers to the highway side. So it's something that I have already asked for, and we'll make sure that I report back to this committee on the progress.
Satisfied, Councillor Took?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Bryan. I agree entirely. I sit on a couple of planning committees and comments from highways are generally limited. And I think there should be a lot more detail, a lot more information in there as to what the effect will be on travel from those areas to places of work. But I agree. Thank you very much for your comment.
Thank you, Councillor Took. Councillor Shortell.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry about doing this all, even though I've got ear problems today. The implication of Section 106 agreements in new developments could implement perhaps the strategic access management monitoring element to actually improve access into those sites. I was wondering if that could would be expanded to the developers' agreement for new developments.
Could I ask that the question was repeated? I couldn't quite catch all of it.
I'm not sure I understood fully the question, Councillor Hotel. Could you just? I'm not sure I fully understood the question. The officer didn't. Could you expand on it, please? The question.
The implication of a Section 106 agreement with developers, and does include a strategic access monitoring and strategic access management and monitoring element, which improves access to those particular sites. And I wonder if that could be expanded to improve access, road access into the new developments.
On new planning applications, I think Councillor Bryan.
Yes, I understand the question, but it's more of a planning issue and not a highways issue. So I think taking this a little bit further forward, we may find that for future meetings we need to have a broader section of officers here because of the linking questions that are now coming through. It's something I've just been discussing with John Selgren.
Mr Selgren.
Thank you, Chairman. So just to endorse what Councillor Bryan has said, I think it is an important line of questioning that the committee is taking, and if it is something you'd like to pursue, Chairman, through you, I can arrange to have the relevant officers, and I think Councillor Bryan's colleague, Councillor Walsh, portfolio holder for planning, as part of a future discussion. So I think this would be a useful area for the committee to explore and make some recommendations on, but I think you'll be able to do that more effectively if you've got the range of expertise in the room to have that discussion.
Thank you, Mr Selgren. Okay, so if I can go to page 16 at 1.12, officers. Would you agree that accurate data regarding bus patronage is almost impossible due to the COVID pandemic impact? This has been further complicated by the £2 bus travel scheme to encourage bus use. How can you forecast further bus travel passenger numbers once the £2 scheme comes to an end, and over what time period as you start to plan for LTP4? I appreciate the LTP3 as we've come to the end of that and we're past that now, and I'm trying to get an understanding as to how you're going to get any accurate figures on what you consider you can put into LTP4 on that bus travel, because it has been, the data is so skewed now.
So generally we consider 2019 to be the last year of which we've got accurate data for bus patronage, and then the last 2 years we saw significant disruption due to COVID, as you've described, and now we are coming out the other side of that, but with a very different bus market of people who are using the buses. So the traditional commuter market has certainly declined and is changing, so we don't see regular patterns of commuting Monday to Friday, but we do see peaks midweek, but we are seeing a surge in the leisure market, which obviously within Dorset does create a significant opportunity, given its status as a visitor destination. So it does create challenges understanding how the market is developing, but through the enhanced partnership that's been set up to deliver the bus service improvement plan, we now work much more closely with our operators, those commercial operators, as well as our operators of our supported routes. And we do have data sharing agreements in place so that we can better understand how the market is developing going forward.
Thank you. As I say, I'm interested to know how, with this £2 scheme that's come in, that, as you say, I suspect we're seeing a greater proportion of the leisure market using it because it's cheaper than actually taking a car, and you haven't got to pay a car parking fee at the end of it, which I know Councillor Bright is going to be upset about because he's losing revenue. But the fact is that I guess that the leisure market is seeing that increase because of the £2 scheme. That's going to come to an end at some point. They're not going to be able to continue with that forever and a day. And therefore, I would just imagine that in going into LTP4 to try and plan for that, I'm not sure how you're going to establish your figures as to where you're going to get that from, because you're looking at a crystal ball, aren't you? You're not going to have that data year on year to refer back to. And also, we did a survey, a resident survey, which 49% responded to a satisfied response. I just wonder how that compared with other councils, whether we knew or not, and what percentage number of the residents actually responded to that survey. I appreciate if you haven't got the detail to hand, but it would be interesting to know. So there's 2 points there.
You're quite right. So I don't have the detail, but this is the highways survey. So it's a proportional sample that goes out to households across Dorset, but also is undertaken nationally. So we can compare to within the region and nationally to see how our bus satisfaction performs against others. But it is fair to say that the levels of satisfaction in Dorset are lower than in other areas of the southwest. And I think through the work that we've done on the bus service improvement plan, we do have a good understanding of why people are dissatisfied with public transport. And it really does come back to sort of fairly basic fundamentals. It's about the frequency of services. It's about the coverage of services, particularly in our rural areas. And these are significant challenges because at the present time, we don't have the resources to really address those priority areas. But through the bus service improvement plan, we are looking to make improvements where we can within our existing budgets.
Thank you. Yeah, you preempted me with my thinking on that, in that it is because we are such a rural council, the frequency of those bus services are compromised because the bus companies can't make them financially viable, so they put on less of a bus service. Councillor Bryan, I know that you were really disappointed with the bus better back scheme and the funding that we got over that, and that most of it went into our neighbouring authority. And I trust that you also continue those arguments with government to try and improve that funding. We've had that discussion already within this committee previously, but it's interesting to note that the dissatisfaction is coming from those rural isolated communities that just do not have a significant bus service that's accommodating them. Would that be a fair answer to the question?
You're absolutely right. And whilst I welcome the fact that the government have extended the £2 scheme, although it goes to £2.50, it is distorting figures. It makes it very difficult when I'm trying to put together plans that will improve our bus services throughout the county, that we have the distortion. I make no secret of my disappointment to the treatment of Dorset on the awards. In fact, I made it very clear at a parish AGM that I attended last Saturday that I was not satisfied with the award we'd got, and I question how they come up with these numbers. And every time I ask the question, I get the same answer. It's the formula that they use that is so much of a disadvantage to us. I mean, let's face it, we get very little regional support grant and we get very little help on the public services side. So it is something that I am pretty strong-willed on and aren't going to let go. In fact, only this morning I was having a conversation with John Selgrim about ways in which we can potentially take the next step, because we have to do something as a council to make sure that our citizens, our residents, have got the opportunity to be able to have a bus, even if it's only once or twice a day. We have to start looking at providing those services. I chair the enhanced partnership, and Councillor Knocklacey-Clark chairs the stakeholder. The bus companies are quite keen to work with us, but of course it's all down to their private businesses, and they have to make money. So it's a very difficult stage that we're going through at the moment. But I haven't given up on getting money to support our programme, which I have to say is still one of the best that was put forward.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. If I can just move page 17 at 2.3. We obviously know that the LTP3 saw some significant infrastructure creation during LTP3 and LTP4. No doubt the officers are planning to have a further significant infrastructure building to go on, which obviously comes at a considerable cost. So I'm just wondering, what percentage of European funding are we forecast to lose in Dorset, and what's the estimation in monetary terms? Will it impact on delivering on what remains of LTP3, and will it expose difficulties in project planning for LTP4?
I don't think we have that information to hand to respond to that question now. I think that we would have to come back to you on that one.
Okay, so I think it would be interesting to have that information come back to this committee, even if it's in a chairman's briefing. Thank you. at page 20 at 5.2, which is touching on the CO2 levels again. With regards to achieving carbon reduction levels determined by the Department of Transport, they are to assist councils such as ours to help to achieve their target figures. What risk does Dorset face in not achieving those targets due to an inefficient national grid capacity to accommodate electric car charging in the county-wide area? Presently, there is a steer towards electric cars rather than utilising hydrogen-powered cars or transport. So we know that we're going to be doing a piece of work within this committee in the future on grid provision. We know that Dorset Council has got a significant issue over grid provision with probably no significant infrastructure update for the next 30 years. And yet we are going to be tasked with achieving these CO2 reductions and with the government stopping the production of combustion engine cars, petrol diesel cars. So I just wonder how that is going to affect LTP4 and what risks are we at within that.
So there are pieces of work underway to try and better understand how the EV market within Dorset will develop over the short, medium and longer term. And that will help us to make decisions about where we need infrastructure and what types of infrastructure we will need to support electric vehicles in the future. I think you're right to raise that as a strategic issue regarding grid capacity, but we need to sort of overlay the information that we're developing to understand the market with then discussions with the grid infrastructure companies, the DNOs, so that we can understand where those risks and where those constraints are. And that will be a part of the process of developing LTP4.
Thank you. So if I move to page 25, urban traffic control. So in planning for LTP4, something that's come to my notice, my attention on an increasingly regular basis is about exceptional extraordinary convoy movement on Dorset roads. So I just wonder what was being done in planning terms around those movements. So I don't really want to wish to name a company by name, but we have a boat builder in Dorset that has a tendency to move extremely large convoy loads on Dorset Council roads during the daytime. It causes huge disruption to travel, and which impacts on the movement of our residents and obviously on the economy in Dorset. And I just wonder if anything was being done to facilitate nighttime movement of these convoys, whether that was possible or not, to have those conversations with the various companies. But I wonder whether that could be brought into LTP4 and planning with our neighbouring authority to improve those traffic movements for our residents and the economy in Dorset. I don't see any reason why they can't be moved at night. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Councillor Bryan.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting point that you've raised, because I was at my local parish council meeting last night when this took up about 20 minutes of the debate, because we have two local manufacturers who transport very large loads, either through my colleagues in Westmoors or through my own parish. And it's a very difficult situation, because you can try and persuade the companies to move their loads at night, but of course it does tend to be more costly for them to do it. I'm not sure, and I need to take it away. As I say, the question was raised last night, so you caught me a little bit on the hop, Chairman, because I don't have the answer that I need to give you at this precise time. So, but as I say, I think most areas are now suffering with heavy transport going through their areas, and it's something that we need to look at. But the exceptional loads is something we definitely need to look at, because on more than one occasion, traffic has to get onto the grass verge for some of these loads to come through, especially on our more rural roads. So let me take that away, and then, as I say, I'll report back to the committee on the findings and what actions we can actually take.
Thank you, Councillor Bryant. I think a lot of this is going to come back to this committee. There is a lot of answers to come back. I mean, I will just very briefly give the incidents that I had just a couple of weeks ago, which was coming here to County Hall, which I met the convoy at Bear Regis roundabout, police outriders, motorcycles close in the roundabouts at each one. When I actually got to Dorchester, to the roundabout to come into Dorchester, as you look up the Dorchester bypass up the hill, the police had closed the roundabout. The traffic was extremely heavy. It was queued all the way up the hill coming towards the Dorchester roundabout with an ambulance with blue lights and sirens on the wrong side of the road coming all the way down that hill. I think we've got quite a significant issue with exceptional convoy movement on our roads, which, as we've already said in this committee, are very rural, they're very narrow, and surely those convoys need to be moving at night. They are having now quite a significant impact on traffic movement within Dorset and its economy. So I'd appreciate if you do take that away and ask the question. Councillor Bryant.
Yeah, I actually sit on the Road Transport Safety Group, so I'll make a point of taking this to them as well, because obviously we could do with the assistance from the police to make sure that we're perhaps better informed when there's some of this heavy traffic on the move. We've got a lot of tank movements going on at the moment, which my local experience, because I've got a facility by me where they test the tanks, but they cross the road, which causes all sorts of issues for us locally. So let me take it up with the safety group, and then again, we'll add to the list of responses we've got to come back to you on.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a bit like the comments made earlier about the planning input. Again, I think this is a very, very helpful question, as Councillor Bryan has said and responded to, and has made you, as a committee, that offer to come back. Again, this is very much in the area of the operational highways activities. And again, there's obviously experts that we have within the Directorate, I'm sure, can respond to all those questions. If you would like, Chairman, to have a more focused discussion on that side of things, just a reminder that this morning we're focusing particularly on the LTP and the investments we made in the strategic network rather than on the operational side. I do appreciate, Chairman, how difficult it is because you clearly can't talk about one without the other, but I'm conscious that the colleagues that we've brought in to speak to this morning have the background on the investment side of things. I think we'd want to bring in a slightly wider group of colleagues if you wanted to kind of have a more wide-ranging discussion, but taking the tone from Councillor Bryan, if you would like to do that, then that's clearly something we will happily support you to do.
Thank you, Mr. Selgren. Yeah, I was interested to know whether there had been any discussions within the LTP3 going forward as it's been panning out as to how that's going to influence LTP4, which, as I've said, I think those types of traffic movements on our roads, I think it's a conversation that could be had in LTP4 for planning for it because it does have an impact on our traffic movements and our economy within Dorset. Councillor Lacey-Clark.
Yes, Chairman, I was going to make one of the points that Mr. Selgren made, but I think to avoid replication, part of the LTP4 process is coming in July to overview rather than scrutiny, and all of these questions and there's some really valid points which you've made, which will then go forward, be considered, and then actually the response will be better suited going there to the July meeting rather than replicating the same meeting twice different places. So it might be that you want to talk to the chair of overview and organise attending as well and having a time to speak there. Otherwise, it just strikes me that we're going to have functionally the same meeting twice for no reason.
Thank you, Councillor Lacey-Clark. Did you wish to come back?
Chairman, just say if like working with the committee team, very happily with your input, see if we can facilitate that meeting if that's something that this committee would like to do.
Thank you. Councillor Bryan.
Yeah, for the benefit of members of the public who will be listening in on this, can I just point out that the LTP3 and LTP4 is in conjunction with BCP. It's Dorset-wide. We haven't had a recent meeting due to the political situation there. I've just seen who my opposite number is going to be on this particular project, and it happens to be Councillor Vicky Slade, who is going to be handling this for BCP. So I'm looking forward to the first meeting that I have with her so that we can progress this, but we do still need the detail coming from government before we can take it any further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. Yes, we do appreciate that. The government need to give us the guidance on LTP4. Can I go to Councillor Took, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just before I come up with a point, talking to BCP is great. There's also other neighbouring counties that we need to talk to as well, just to make sure that there is some joined up thinking, but I'm sure you're all across that, Ray. The question I wanted to talk about was electric vehicle charging. On page 24, you've got EVCP's installation in public car parks. That seems to be going reasonably well as far as I understand, that there's progress being made. There are, as I understand it, some issues where it's sometimes difficult, and we might come on to this a bit later, but there's issues connecting these charging points up to the grid, and there are some difficulties there. I know of one in particular. But my other, following on from that is are we looking at lamppost charging, which is a thing that is currently being talked about nationally, where you can attach charging points to lampposts, which already have an infrastructure, they have power, and can provide a cheaper solution and a better solution for home charging. I just wondered what we were doing in regard to that. Thank you.
Officer wish to respond.
So yeah, the first phases of our EV charge point rollout program have focused on our public car parks, land owned by Dorset Council, and those programs have largely progressed very successfully. There have been issues with grid connections in some isolated locations, but most often we are able to find an alternative location nearby that solves that specific problem. Going forward, the programme is now going to start looking at our rural areas. So the Charging Ahead programme that's received government local electric vehicle infrastructure funding, Levi funding, will progress that work now over the next couple of years. And we really want to see the expansion of the network so that we've got an accessible network across all of Dorset. So in the majority of cases, that will mean locating charge points on community land, but also possibly further on the Dorset Council property estate. In terms of lamppost charging, so that's a solution to on-street residential charging for those. A significant proportion of households within Dorset don't have off-street parking, and we need to look at a range of solutions to meet those needs. So some of that is provided for by having destination charging where people regularly visit. Some of that will be solved through workplace charging, so making sure that there are charge points at the places where people are employed so they can charge up during the day there. And some of it we will need to look at solutions for how we provide charge points to meet that on-street demand locally. And that could involve lamppost charging, but we have specific issues in Dorset that we would need to overcome, where the majority of our lamppost columns are at the back of the highway. We also have a PFI contract in place, which would need to be renegotiated to make that provision possible, but also recognising that those charge points are very low speed charge points, so they tend to be 2 or 3 kilowatt charge points, so you do need to be connected up for them for a significant proportion of the time. So there's a lot of things to consider when we look at on-street charging and what might be the most appropriate solution to each location. So that work will progress over coming years.
Thank you. I suspect this has already been spoke about this morning, that this whole technology, this industry is changing at such a rapid pace that I suspect that we'll be having cars that are self-charging. To me, it's a no-brainer, really. I think the dynamos on bicycles were back in the 1920s, I think, or possibly even earlier than that. To me, it's been an absolute bewildering that the electric car production never started with dynamos that were self-charging while they were running. But I guess there must be some technical reason for that, and manufacturers must know what they're doing, I guess. Councillor Bryan.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to respond to something that Councillor Tooks mentioned. And the officers are in constant contact with all of our neighbours on so many issues. I personally meet with our neighbours at the Western Gateway. So I'm in contact with my opposite portfolio holders via the Western Gateway. And more recently, I've been having in-depth conversations with Somerset in conjunction with John Selgren on things that we feel we can jointly do together. So we are talking to all of our neighbours, and it's essential that we do. We're not an island. We're part of we're a big part of a big picture.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. So if we can just come to page 26, 29, improved access to railway stations. I forget what the other title was, but we've seen that through LTP3, the officers have really given a considerable thought to using the previous railway infrastructure that was cut during the beaching cuts. So like the Castlemaine Trailway, which has been put to good use as cycling and walkways. We know a lot of these lines, which obviously tended to be in a direct route from A to B, because they were railways, become rambler walkways and what have you. And I just wondered whether there was any thought being given as we plan for LTP4 about using some of those former rail lines that suffered under the beaching cuts to accommodate electric trams or light narrow gauge railways or that type of thing. There's obviously significant issues over land ownerships. Unfortunately, if they'd all been laid to tarmac, hindsight's a wonderful thing, not that we should ever got rid of the railways in the first place, personal view, that they would be in a far better position than we currently are. But the 1960s decision that we were going to put everything on the roads was an interesting concept and idea back then, and certainly I think we're all probably agreed in this room that it's not working. So I just wondered whether to formulate the plans going forward for LTP4, we've made good use of some of the those former rail networks in LTP3 and in LTP4. Is there any ideas about, as I say, using those electric railways or narrow gauge railways to move residential population and working population to and from? Is there anywhere in Dorset that would accommodate that, or are we on a non-starter there?
Thank you, Chairman. Again, that very much is a conversation that will be coming up. The point's noted and the comment is noted, but that's something for the LTP4 going forward, and very much would have to depend on the government guidance that comes out, what we can look at, what we can't look at. And as you know, currently, we do look at that, and that is something that is absolutely considered. So comment is absolutely noted, and that will go forward to the LTP4 meeting in July.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions from members? Do any members have any other comment they wish to make on this agenda item? No? Okay, so if we quickly run through some of the points that have been captured. Shall I do my first, then you pick up what I've missed? So a comparison to Southwest authorities in the region in terms of the funding that we get. To ask government to give incremental funding year on year and improve the amount that Dorset Council receive overall, which Councillor Bryan, I think falls in your lap, take that forward to government. Spatial and strategic planning is constrained by future-proofing and connecting road infrastructure, cost prohibitive to council and develop contributions, so would need government funding in order to achieve housing numbers demanded by the government, to have that connectivity between our dormitory villages and towns. Request for police to share information with Dorset Council so analysis can be done regarding visitor accidents compared to local residential accidents, so that the officers can do that analysis at work. And very grateful to Councillor Lacey Clark for the suggestion. Councillor Lacey Clark?
On that, would you consider also asking for the near misses and non-injury data from the police?
Certainly, Councillor Lacey Clark, yes, thank you. 20 mile per hour risk impacting CO2 emissions and impacting the LTP4 planning. Bus rural provision impacting on our residents' dissatisfaction. Sorry, the rural provision. Investigation of external convoy movements at night. And Ms Watson, do you want to pick up on anything significant that I've missed? Thank you.
I'm not sure, without having gone through my notes and details, anything else. I think the main thing is there needs to be a discussion after the meeting, probably between ourselves and officers, just to clarify the points the committee are putting forward in terms of the comments for the July report to the overview committee about LTP4, and if there's anything that is a sort of outside of that that needs to be addressed, come back to this committee. So it's just about, yeah, the comments that are going forward to the Place and Resources Overview Committee. Is there anything else that needs to come back to this committee? But I think we just need to take stock of the notes of the meeting and then perhaps just agree that.
Thank you, Ms Watson. And is there any member want to add anything at this particular point in time? Councillor Took?
Just on the road collisions, there is a Collision Explorer map online where we can look at collisions. That differentiates between serious and minor, but I'm not too sure how minor is minor on that. But to get some more information would be great. So I think I'd support that.
Thank you, Councillor Took. Yeah, I think what I was particularly interested about was what was the visitor collision statistics and fatalities and our residential population to give the officers an understanding on our planning of road infrastructure and signage. Councillor Lacey-Clark.
If it helps committee understanding, that level of Explorer is just the incidents that are reported to us and the serious ones from the police, not the everyday ones that are routinely reported to the police but don't require significant intervention from any of the blue light services. And it's those ones that we don't have access to currently, but would absolutely show some very interesting data.
Thank you, Councillor Lacey-Clark. Okay, members, so the recommendation, as we said, was to ask the committee considers the information provided in this report and background papers and notes the achievements of LTP3 against the key performance indicators since 2017. Comments are sought to respect of LTP3 and will be considered during planning for LTP4. So the officers happy? Is that okay? Okay, thank you ever so much for your reports. Thank you for the questions you've answered. I do appreciate you being here. And thank you, Councillor Bryan and Councillor Lacey-Clark, also for your input as well. Thank you. Okay, members, we will move to agenda item 8, the Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee work programme. To note the items for the next meeting for July 23, and Ms Watson to take us through that, please.
Committee, you've got 2 items coming up at your next meeting on the 4th of July. You've got an update on the climate strategy, and then you've got your regular performance monitoring, looking at the dashboard. So those are your 2 items for July.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Committee members to flag up any areas of potential review from performance dashboard. The items are not for discussing at this meeting, but seeking additional information or adding to the forward plan. So if I go to operational corporate, Councillor Pearce, Brown, Barry Gorringe and David Shortell, is there anything you wish to raise at the moment? Thank you. Subject obviously to the previous item that you were going to keep an overview over the FOI requests and such like. Thank you. So if I move to operational place, Councillors Took and Andrews, is there anything you wish to raise at this point in time?
Only that I would like to see detailed figures for the movement in the 5-year land supply and the delivery test, which seem to be only available once a year and then shift dramatically. we must be aware of how these are moving, and I think we need to report on this internally, because otherwise we get planning applications that you think, well, that's outside policy, we've got a 5.2 land year supply, and suddenly we don't. So we need to keep this much more in focus, and I'd like to see some of those figures on the dashboard if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Took. We'll take that away and ask the question. Thank you. Councillor Andrews?
Yeah, my concern is, once again, as we keep bringing it up, the data that we get on the dashboard is 2 months out of date. And kind of, it's not real time. Things have gone by then. And I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned why we aren't disciplined enough to make sure that every month, by a certain time in the month, that data hasn't gone into the dashboard. So it's a concern. I think it's a discipline issue, and making sure that departmental heads make sure they get that stuff into the dashboard, so we can actually see what's going on in real time instead of 2 or 3 months ago.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. I know it's not the first time that you've raised that, and we have had discussions with Mr Bonner, who is chasing that. And as you've always said, the dashboard is only as good as the information that's been inputted into it. Thank you. Okay, so if we move to HR, Councillors Adkins, Canning and Trite. Is there anything you wish to raise at the moment? Content? Thank you. Okay, so members will see that within the report there is a summary scope for the review of the grid capacity. So this is just being brought to you so that you've had sight of it, and to inform the committee that a task and finish group will be set up from across the chamber in order to progress the work and bring a report back to this committee. So are members content with that? Yeah, thank you. If we move to agenda item 9, the Cabinet Forward Plan. Ms Watson, to take us through that, please.
I'll just do my normal reminder. The reason that you have the Cabinet Forward Plan and decisions on your agenda is for you to use a tool in order to identify any potential areas for post-decision review. So they are there for your information.
So members, if there is anything within that Cabinet Forward Plan, if you would like to convey to myself and the Vice Chairman if there was anything that you wish to take a look at that in the future, please, and do so. I'll move to agenda item 10, urgent items, and there are no urgent items. I'll move to agenda item 11, exempt business. There is no exempt business. So members, I will close the meeting at 11:53. Thank you ever so much for your attendance and for your input, and thank you to the officers. Thank you.